Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Pacers Daily. I am your host, Hery Acosta. First round of the NBA draft just happened, and Pacers didn't do anything. Pacers didn't have a pick. So, what better to do than just to talk about some players that the Pacers could potentially trade for? Now, these aren't necessarily like, oh, these players have a crazy big chances to go to Indiana, but it's interesting to talk about. First one is Lauri Markkanen. Um, there's been a lot of rumors about Lauri Markkanen over the past year and a half, ever since his All-Star season in Utah. But they're coming off being the worst team in the NBA, ended up with fifth pick, but there really isn't any. There's a bright future, some good young players in Utah, but nothing that really screams, oh, this rebuild is going to be perfect. But they have a player in Lauri Markkanen who is an all-star, who is someone that needs to go to a contender. And that's why I put him first, just because two of these four players are linked to Indiana at some point. Um, Lauri is one of them. A trade involving some young guys, kind of like Ben Mathurin, a Shepherd, or Jarris Walker, a few picks. Not all those three together, but these are kind of just players that could be involved in that trade. Um, Last year there was actually a rumor about Obi Toppin being the headliner for the Pacers to go to Utah for Markkanen. Don't really think that's gonna be the case this year. I think that the Jazz, if they're gonna trade Markkanen to the Pacers, are gonna want some young stars. And between Shepherd, Mathurin, and Walker, the average age there is about 22, 23 years old. So be very interesting to see what the Jazz and the Pacers come up with if there is a trade there. Obviously, Lauri's been linked to other teams like the Warriors. Everyone's being linked to the Heat, so it wouldn't it would make sense that the Heat would be linked to Lauri Markkanen as well. Lakers could be another team that could potentially throw their hat in the race. So that's one to really look at. This one is more of a this one is more of an out there trade, just because the Grizzlies did trade Desmond Bane. If you really want to consider it a big three, you can. John Morant, Jaren Jackson Jr., and Desmond Bane. But the thing is, Jaren Jackson probably has more kind of like that. They would probably keep him over Ja. Obviously, they already traded Bane, so Bane's not in that conversation. But if they're gonna pick a side between Ja and Jaren, they would probably trade Ja first, just because obviously his off the court issues. He hasn't been healthy in the last 2 years. But the Grizzlies could start a rebuild if they get the right kind of deal. Now, we all know Miles Turner was on his last season of his contract, but there's a good chance that if there's a sign and trade, the Pacers could go all in for Jaren Jackson, put partner him with Pascal Siakam, have him as another defensive anchor around Aaron Nesmith and Andrew Nemhard. That would be a very deadly lineup. Now, don't get me wrong, Turner's very valuable to the city, very loyal. We love Miles Turner here in Indy. But if the price comes, Turner would be a headliner. Someone like Jarris Walker, even a Benedict Mathurin, and a good amount of first round picks. Sorry, good amount of first round picks over the next few years. And this trade could possibly be done. Like I said, probably the most out there player to really talk about, but there's a lot of different deals that could go down. Now, Pacers want to get Jaren Jackson without trading some value, some valuable assets. So Pacers are still in win now mode, even with Halliburton out. They could still be a playoff team without a doubt. They have some good players. They could see some breakout seasons from a Nemhard or a Neesmith, or if they keep Mathurin and Mathurin. But the next one I actually think is the most um, kind of like the most realistic trade piece that the Pacers could go for. And that's mainly because he's been linked to the Pacers since last year. There was a lot of talk that he could have joined the Pacers during the trade deadline last season, but instead he stayed on the Nets. And Cam Johnson, now he's not going to be worth 3, 4 first round picks, but he will be worth Matherin and about one or two, whether one's a first, one's a second. Cam Johnson's a good player. We're not going to give Brooklyn the haul that New York gave him for Mikal Bridges, which was 5 first round picks. But there's a good chance that just a Benedict Matherin, maybe a throw-in piece like a Tony Bradley, or um, I wouldn't say Furphy. Furphy would not be a good throw-in piece in this situation, but maybe Jarius Walker, and there could be another throw-in piece. They could throw in a Maxwell Lewis, just something like that for just to kind of even out the contracts. But this one's more like it. I'm gonna keep talking about this one over the next few episodes, just because I kind of want to get a more in depth about how a Cam Johnson trade would actually look for the Pacers. Right now, I'm kind of just giving realistic trade ideas and just kind of talking about this is a good fit. We could play the three. We're gonna have a lot of questions about how the starting lineup's gonna look. As of right now, Matherin looks like he's gonna be a starter with if there's no changes made at all. Now, if there's a changes made, he's gonna Cam Johnson will be a starter. And if Matherin's the only player we give up, then a lineup of Nembhard, Neesmith, Johnson, Siakam, Turner doesn't look too bad. But this is one. Now the next one, I don't think this will happen. I don't think Derrick White. I don't think the Celtics would want to trade Derrick White to the Pacers. Now, I like to think that Derrick White is the most valuable zero-time All-Star that's over the age of 25 in the NBA. And the reason is because just of how it's a weird way to explain a player like Derrick White because first off, he's a great defender. So that's an easy one. But he's also a really good scorer and a really good playmaker. But he's also someone that's been the fourth or fifth option on a championship team over the past 2 years. But he is one of those players that on any given night he can drop 30, he can drop 40. But he's not the number one option. He has yet to really play as the number one option. He had a few games where Tatum and Brown were resting or not playing, where he showed up and showed out. Games where they were playing and he ended up being the number one option. So Derrick White is one of those players that if he came to a situation like Indiana, he could be an all-star in his first season. We've seen a lot of players that, well, Derrick White wasn't really a high draft pick. He was a 30th. But we've seen players like Oladipo, Sabonis, go from Halliburton, go from not really getting the opportunity to really shine on their old teams, and then they came to Indiana and became all-stars pretty quickly. Now, I'm not saying that Derrick White hasn't shined. Derrick White has played amazing. Derrick White built the statue in Boston. If it was as good as Drew Holiday and Porzingis trades were, that team does not win without Derrick White's contributions in 2023. But it's just one of those things where you got to really figure out what you could actually give up for a Derrick White. Now he's worth multiple first round picks, but what players do you give up in this trade? And that's going to be a really interesting one that I kind of want to talk about more in depth over the next few episodes as well. Just because the Celtics are in a very weird kind of like they don't know if they want to rebuild, but the trade that they made for Drew and for Porzingis, the Porzingis trade doesn't. Yes, it made sense because I knew they were going to get rid of Porzingis, but they didn't really get much value out of that trade. Now, the Holiday trade was good, but They're thinking about rerouting Anthony Simons. And I might talk about Anthony Simons just because he would be a good young player to bring to the team. He's 26 years old. Could potentially be a starter. That could be another trade where a Matherin or someone would be involved going to Portland. But there is going to be a lot to talk about. The offseason free agency starts only 4 or 5 days. So we're going to have a lot to talk about over the next few weeks. Signings. Any big breaking news I will be talking about. So just keep keep at it. Um, I'm Hery Acosta. This is Pacers Daily. And you know how I like to end my videos. Boom, baby. Everyone have a great day.